As American President Donald Trump gravely misread India, after days of not really confronting him head on, at least overtly, India's foreign ministry issued a fact filled statement basically calling out Western hypocrisy, the United States and the European Union in specific, when it comes to trade with Russia. This after Trump made yet another threat, this time talking about significantly increasing tariffs on India and once again linking his decision to the purchase of oil by India from Russia. In the midst of all this, come media reports that NSA Ajit Doval will be in Moscow. The Times of India, in fact, reports that he is arriving there today. Other media platforms suggest that he will be arriving later this week. While there is no official announcement yet of Mr. Doval's schedule, one thing is clear. India has clearly decided to go head to head with Trump now in the public domain. Where does this leave the fate of the trade negotiations? Will India walk away, hunker down and talk, or also, much like Trump, talk but also attack and counterattack when hit? How did relations between India and USA implode in this fashion? And does it all really come down to Trump's desperate need for acknowledgement of what he calls America's role in Operation Sindoor? I'm Barkha, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we ask what is the best way, the smartest way for India to deal with Donald Trump? Clearly, none of the old rules apply, and India is beginning to learn this. Donald Trump makes a threat a day when it comes to India these days. Pakistan and Bangladesh are among 50 countries with lower tariffs than India. Some are arguing that it's time to look beyond the United States of America. Others are saying that India will not walk away from the negotiating table, but will not give up or cross any of its own red lines. The Times of India is reporting that National Security Advisor Ajit Doval is all set to reach Moscow, even suggesting that that trip could be as early as today. Mojo Story has no independent corroboration of this report, but it is being widely reported across multiple media platforms that Ajit Doval could arrive in Moscow as early as today, and Jaishankar, foreign minister, is also scheduled to visit later this month. As India holds its own with the foreign ministry calling out hypocrisy when it comes to Western positions on trade with Russia, the big elephant in the room is quite simply this. Should India walk away from these negotiations? How should India deal with Trump? We're having this conversation, of course, on the anniversary of the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir. And today was also the day, interestingly, when the NDA passed a resolution felicitating the Prime Minister and the military's leadership in Operation Sindoor. I mention this in this context because many believe that Trump's great peak is at having had no public acknowledgement on what he calls the American role in brokering peace between India and Pakistan. India has rubbished reports of mediation. Let me introduce our guest today as we try and understand what's happening, geopolitics as we know it being upended. Joining me now is Suhasini Haidar, who's of course a veteran journalist and the diplomatic editor at The Hindu. Good to see you, Suhasini. Rajat Sethi, political analyst, is with us. Welcome back, Rajat. Prasad Duvuri is with us. He's a businessman who spends time between India and the United States of America, a green card holder, a businessman based out of America who's going to talk about how these tariffs are going to impact both markets. And also joining me is veteran diplomat Ambassador Manjeev Puri. Thank you very much and namaskar and good to see all of you. Ambassador Puri, I'll start with you. For a few days, all we said was that India is going to safeguard its own interests. We didn't really get into specifics. But obviously, something happened, something snapped, and a very detailed statement has come from the MEA, a statement that not just talks about India being targeted, that's the word being used, unfairly and unjustified targeting of India, but also calls out what India says is blatant hypocrisy by the West. India makes a point about the $3.5 billion trade between Russia and the United States just last year. It talks about the European Union's continued trade relations with Russia. And it also talks about a point earlier in the conflict when Russia invaded Ukraine, when the Americans actually encouraged India to purchase oil from Russia. Do you think something has now gone beyond repair when it comes to Trump and India. What did you make of the foreign ministry statement?
Barkha, thank you very much. I have never been of the view that you don't have to stop or that you have to stop negotiating and engaging with the United States. It's too important a relationship. And yes, the relationship is going through, I won't use the word hiccups, it's going through serious challenges there based on personalities of the individuals and based on what is actually the requirements that may be met basically for domestic policy requirements of President Trump, the kind of individual he is. But you must continue to engage with the United States because it's a relationship of great importance to us. I'm glad we have somebody who is part of this relationship based in the United States who's there to enlighten us. Look, let's use these words, hypocrisy, double standards, knowing what they are. International relations have these as par for the course. This is a power game of nations. And India is a country which is coming into its own. The United States under Donald Trump is of the view that, that whole idea that you must respect us is something which sits with him, with his constituencies back home. And that's exactly what he's doing. And therefore, let me say this. Yes, we should do what we are doing, but at the same time keep up the engagements, which I think is also good. Signaling is important, but at the end of the day, you should also try and reach deals in which there is, if not a W, a large W, small win-wins for every side. Of course, there are certain gives and takes, and you have to accept that's the way of the relationship. You look at a larger picture in this entire game.
So what is the larger picture here? I would imagine one larger picture is that India-US relationship is larger than Trump. Trump isn't going to be there forever. So Trump cannot be allowed to define that relationship. So I see that point. But, when it comes to self-respect of nations, dignity of nations, pride of nations, and also not being dictated to. Frankly, for me as an Indian, it just boils down to not being dictated to. Now, I know you may find that a naive response, a hot-headed response. You are trained to walk those minefields. But how does India assert its autonomy in the face of Trump's taunts, everyday threats? What is the tightrope here?
So, Barkha, this word strategic autonomy, multi-alignment, we've been hearing it for years. Now, let's also learn that this is a talk that has to be walked. It's not just words that you say for the sake of the Indian population. You have to walk them. And oil imports from Russia is one particular aspect of that. Arms relationships, nuclear relationships, there are a whole lot of them. Let me also make the point to you that for the United States too, India is an important relationship in overall size of things that we do. Let's look at Boeing Aircraft Company, for example, in terms of the kind of sales that would take place to India. Defense equipment, what are the possibilities? Let's not even leave out the question of oil and petroleum, quite apart from some of the biggest backers of Mr. Trump, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg or any of the others. India are huge markets for all of them. So this is a relationship. I would be very hesitant to, climb up this ladder of self-respect, etc. Let's look at our interests. Let's act in a matured manner. He is what he is. We know how he is. But let's look at our interests and let's remain engaged and let's see how these things pan out. 25th August, their team is supposed to come here. Let's see what happens. We must also signal that we are not a country which is, willing to be a pushover. That's fine. That's good signaling. But remain focused on your own interests and try and see what best you can do with that.
Okay, that's a very cool-headed clinical response. And let me bring in Suhasini at this point. Suhasini, you have probably decoded thousands and thousands of press releases from the foreign ministry. Is over the years that you have been such a senior journalist, is there one particular thing that leaps out at you in this statement? Is it unlike others? Is it unlike what you'd expect an Indian press release to be on the United States of America? What has leapt out to you? Secondly, we have the Times of India reporting that NSA Doval may have advanced what is being described as a prescheduled visit, saying he may even arrive as early as today. I personally have no independent corroboration of this, but this is what is being widely reported across different media platforms. Would that be counted as a pointed signal if it were to be the case? So, Hassan.
Well, I mean, to just deal with the issue of the NSA going to Moscow, we've known for some months that, it is the turn of Russian President Putin to come to India this year for the annual summit. Ahead of his visit, we always see a visit by the NSA as well as the External Affairs Minister. And after that, we see the Intergovernmental Commission taking place between the two sides, which really sets the course for the summit between them. It often happens towards the end of the year, but because India-Russia relations in the last few years, because of the conflict in Ukraine, have had to sometimes change their schedule. It's quite possible that this is just it was planned just ahead of the visit of President Putin later this year at whatever point he is. Of course, the timing is very important because we've just had this kind of conflagration with the US, these threats coming from Mr. Trump about an added penalty if India continues to buy oil from Russia. When we come to the MEA statement, I think there's no doubt that this is different from the past. Firstly, because, Ambassador Puri may know better, it seems to be a slightly more prickly a statement, if you like, than I have seen in the past by the Ministry of External Affairs, while the first paragraph and the last paragraph are really India's position. This is what India has had to do. We've had to diversify our supplies because the traditional supplies that were coming from West Asia, from other places, were being diverted to Europe and became very expensive for us. Therefore, the Russian oil worked with us. The last paragraph makes it very clear that as a major economy, India will take all necessary measures to safeguard its national interests and economic security. Certainly, the first time I'm hearing that kind of almost threatening language when it comes to sanctions on Russian oil since 2022. India has really never spoken so explicitly. But I'm surprised by the statements in the middle, which seem to be a little bit of whataboutery, saying, what about the European Union doing this and what about the US doing this? Because the truth is it's neither here nor there. The US has no business to tell India what its partnerships are going to be. If the US decides to penalize India for conducting trade and having a partnership, then the US should be prepared for a response from India. I think that's all that is the message that needs to go out. So yes, I do think that the MEA statement, 6 paragraphs, is quite different from what we have seen in the past. Perhaps it was already coming after the European Union passed its 18th round of sanctions and sanctioned the Indian refinery partially owned by Rosneft called Vadinar and other refineries and processing units in India, and perhaps was accelerated by the fact that just 2 hours before this, Mr. Trump had provided his latest salvo saying that we will be putting penalties on India because they don't seem to care about
And can I ask you briefly, sorry to interrupt you, that when you say that you find the paragraphs on how much trade US does with Russia or EU does with Russia to be besides the point, I think what you're saying is irrespective of whether they do trade or not, the Americans don't get to tell us who we build our relationships with.
Precisely. And, the fact is India's position has been this since 2022. So the idea that they had to come out by pointing out what the US did or what the EU did, it's fairly irrelevant. It is very clear to everyone, and India has been saying this at the G20, India has been saying it so many other places, that India and other members of the Global South have to look to their own national interests in this kind of a situation. And I think that point has been made. I just was making the point that perhaps telling the world what others are doing does not actually add or subtract from India's principled position. But I just want to add that, Barkha, to the question you asked before, I think this is a seminal moment for India as well. We have 2 precepts of how the Modi government has behaved in the last decade. In 2017, there was abject surrender to the Trump administration. When Trump demanded that India should give in on Iranian oil and on Venezuelan oil and zero out those oil imports, India caved. We gave in, we completely cut oil from Iran and Venezuela. And I can tell you the Iranian oil was 12% of India's oil intake, and it was much cheaper. It's even today much cheaper. And much sweeter crude meant for India's refineries. In 2022, India said, no, we will not be stopping our Russian intake. In fact, we increased. Less than 1% of India's oil imports came from Russia prior to 2022. 40% came from Russia for the bulk of the last few years. So that was India's position. And I think at this point, now that Mr. Trump is back in power, this is an important moment to watch how the Modi government deals with this new threat from Trump. Will India cave? Will India, as I said, I think on a show of yours earlier, we have three options. We can give in, give up, or give back. So either we cave or we give up on on what's happening with the US right now and look for alternative partners, maybe even revive the Iranian oil imports, or we give back punitive measures in terms of slowing down other talks with America, slowing down purchases from the US, making it clear that India does have other options.
Okay, so let me take that to Rajat. Give in, give up, or give back. I think perhaps Ambassador Puri will tell us that nothing in diplomacy is so neat. And usually it's a little bit of thoda, as Jane bhi to yaro dialogue went, thoda khao, thoda phenko. Applied differently in this context, it's a little bit of, a little bit of waltzing, a little bit of sort of attack, a little bit of cajoling, a little bit of hard talk, and all of it comes together. But this is not a normal relationship with a normally predictable president. And that is what makes this very different from other tight spots that India has had to negotiate its way out of. Do you agree with Suhasini that in some ways too much caving into Trump set the template for what he was expecting? There are other journalists, Seema Sirohi on this program the other day based out of Washington was saying, why can't you just give Trump the headline he wants? All he wanted was a phone call. All he wanted was a thank you. Bol do usko thank you. You don't have to accept mediation. Bol dijiye thank you. That's one way of looking at it. I don't think like that, but I'm not a diplomat, and I have do not have as fine an understanding of what might be at stake. How do you see it, Rajat?
I think we should all be, buying his Art of Deal book and start looking into the finer details as to how does this man think, do some psychoanalysis on that. But on a serious note, I believe that, these are uncharted waters, from a diplomatic standpoint. My problem, and it has been my consistent problem for the past 3-4 months, is that this bureaucratic formalism of India's foreign service is a huge liability. When you have an adversary, so to say, or / somebody who's cut out of a different cloth, managing him, and on the same side, you have our foreign embassy sitting in DC, still carrying those formal structures and formal, ways of approaching, not engaging with the multiple, tentacles that can be exploited to get into Trump's family, make relationships, make bonds. Just think out of the box. I believe this is, and I also think that it is this time when our diaspora should have stood up in terms of finding accesses, inroads into Trump's coterie and try to find a way out and find a middle ground. My problem is that we invested so much on our diaspora for the last 10 years, building relationships, using that as a prominent tool for using it for our foreign policy objectives. And when it mattered the most, we're not able to instrumentalize any of that. And I strongly still believe that the training of our foreign services is too old school. They are not rising up to the occasion. They're not rising up to the day and age when somebody's posting on a truth social. How do you come out and post? In fact, you look at the day when Trump was tweeting back and forth, our ambassador comes out and he makes a statement that we are opening new consulates in Boston and some other places in the US. That's the contrast. I thought when he's going to make a press conference, he's going to address the issue. Forget about addressing. He just took on a different, again, it could be a scheduled thing, but that is my problem. Why are you too formalistic in your dealing with the Trump administration when they are so informal? He is like literally writing the relationship between India and US over those set of words over Truth Social and on Twitter. So
what would you have had them do instead? Give me an example.
I believe there are enough Indo-Americans in the current White House who have strong influence over Trump. We have not used that. Totally not used that. There are enough Indian origin, top CEOs who can have some kind of a leverage in the US. I mean, where are we using our leverage, Barkha? Today, Pakistan is using that silly leverage of being a neighbor of Iran and Munir trying to get access and having lunches with President Trump. We had 1,000 more leverages over there in the US, and we are not able to use any of that. And this is where I believe, and the more I'm seeing the Twitter chatter of the MAGA audience, I'm seeing increasingly there is now, this is taking a turn towards racism against Indians. So everybody's piggybacking upon what Trump is saying, and it is becoming of a bigger monster here. I mean, while one thing is this trade deal going through, tariff going through or not going through is just the tip of the iceberg here. But there is fundamental shift that is happening in the Indo-US relationship on both the sides, which is deeply concerning. It is not the normal that we were used to. I told you about the surveys that have happened in India. Currently, the confidence level of people opinion on the US is at rock bottom level. It hasn't been this bad for past 20, 30 years. So these are the sort of things which I believe are fundamental shifts that have happened.
Before I come to Prasad, Ambassador Puri, I must let you respond to this because I think there's a very important point Rajat is making about bureaucratic formalism. Even the fact that our ambassadors probably need a green signal when they speak, even that period between Pahalgam terror attack and Operation Sindoor, which really should have been the period that the world should have been being prepared for the fact that a military action was coming. We saw few and far between examples of our high commissioners and diplomats going on Western television. I think one appearance by the US ambassador, a few by our high commissioner to the United Kingdom, and not so many others. When Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri finally did come out to announce the halt in hostilities, Trump had beaten him to it, and Mr. Misri made a 30-second comment, which, he didn't really explain anything to the Indian people. I think there's a point Rajat has here. Is it that the hands of diplomats are tied? Is it that they themselves are trained to respond in a certain way? Does this need other kind of lateral players? How do you see it?
Barkha, I fully understand where Rajat is coming from. Nobody stopped people in India tweeting against Mr. Donald Trump. Why didn't the people do it? Why are you looking at the Indian ambassador to do it? Has the US ambassador tweeted anything? So, diplomacy, the reason why this particular code of doing things in a formal manner has been put across there and developed in the world, there is some rationality to all of this. That it may not be sorting the exact problem at the moment, etc., is a different matter. So let's say this is a question that should be posed to the leadership here in India. Please take to the Twitter, please give an answer on X, do it every day. And let's not expect the ambassador who's following a certain set of things, etc., which need to be done. Now, I want to make another point to you about Indo-Americans there. I have no doubt in my mind, I am several years out of date on this, that the relationships with those people are very good. But there is a domestic agenda in the United States which is being followed by President Trump and his people. And while we may think that Indo-Americans were a very critical part of taking that agenda forward, I'm afraid Rajat also used a particular word which I feel hesitant to use. But that particular word of white supremacy, etc., these are facts which are important. I'm not so sure that these particular things would get used in that sort of a manner. Pakistan is a different kind of ball game when it comes to this particular things. Our leverages are of a different order, of a different kind, and they will get used, and that's what you will see happening. After all, please tell me, when I was growing up, there used to be Pakistanis who used to be CEOs of companies. Today, point out one single person who's doing that. So, these things are happening. You have people of Indian origin who are sitting in high positions in the Trump administration. Does that automatically give us leverage? Are we trying? I'm sure our people are trying. But there is this domestic constituency business in the United States, which President Trump is playing up. That's his particular role. I still believe, yes, this is a very turbulent time. It's difficult, but you need to stay the course. And as you said yourself, I'm not saying 3.5 years. I don't know what will happen after that. But let's also continue to engage. Because in engagement, you might find solutions. They may take a little while, but they are important to engage given the strength and the size of the relationship. And let me tell you, this relationship is not likely to implode or any of those 1971 kind of features. No, that's not happening.
Okay, let me bring in Prasad now with a different, unique perspective. Somebody who's a green card holder, spends a lot of time in the United States of America, sometime here in India, is a businessman, has a direct interest or impact or a consequence as and when these tariffs are executed. Prasad, how do you see this? When Trump first arrived on the scene, there were many Indians who believed that Trump was going to be better for India than the Democrats were going to be. I think that myth has been busted. Two, I think Suhasini made the point that, I mean, she didn't use this phrase, I'm using it, that Trump is a bully. And earlier she said there was too much caving in to him, and now we've got to decide, you give in, give up, or give back. At the moment, we seem to be giving back. It doesn't mean that we won't give in on something, give back on something, and give up on something, because that's what real life is about. How do you see this placed between two countries with a direct business interest? Can you unmute yourself, Prasad, please? Can't hear you. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
First, let us rewind back to a few months. We all saw that famous reality TV unfolding in the White House between Zelensky and Trump and his entire administration. They literally had a dogfight on camera, and the whole world saw it.
Yeah.
Where are we today? Trump has met Zelensky multiple times after that. When that fight happened that day, everybody thought Trump is now going to support Putin and let Russia just completely take over Ukraine. What are we seeing today? The exact opposite. So Trump is extremely transactional to a point where even normal minds like ours cannot even fathom to think or estimate. For him, relationships are reset every night, and the next morning it's a fresh relationship. Friday, he said, oh, I've heard India is not buying oil from Russia. That's a good thing. Monday, he said, oh, now I'm hearing India is still buying oil from Russia. So he behaves on a day-to-day basis, and we have to reciprocate in the same manner. It is uncomfortable. We are not used to it, but that is exactly what we have to do. I think we are all getting too bent out of shape in terms of how he's saying things and how we should be reacting and what the impact would be. If you look at the overall perspective of what he's trying to do for his country, this is a domestic audience game that he's playing. He's got midterms coming up, which is both power as well as referendum on his 2 years. He has to do something, and this particular term has not been very good for him so far. He ended up starting his second term with a huge deficit. There are huge bonds that are maturing that he needs to pay. Interest rates are very high. So everything that he does every day is all due to domestic pressures. He's managing domestic audience and domestic pressures. And from that perspective, I disagree with Suhasini's take on those little whataboutery that was in our statement. I think that's those two bullets about how the EU is continuing to trade with Russia and how the US is continuing to trade with Russia on uranium and other metals. That's an important point to make, because the domestic audience in the US doesn't know about these things. When he says India is buying Russian oil, the whole country is against India. Now, when India releases this statement, the domestic audience actually pays attention because the media picks it up and specifically highlights these things as well. And that's when the hypocrisy gets called out locally in the domestic audience in the US. So I think that was a very good thing that, in fact, happy India finally did that. It took us so long. We should have done this on the very first day of tariffs being announced, that, every time we were accused that we have the highest tariffs in the world and that we are buying Russian oil when the war is going on and people are getting killed. Well, people are getting killed in many parts of the world, and the US has been.
So what you're saying, Prasad, is that Americans actually do not know that America is trading with Russia.
That is correct. They have no idea. They thought because of sanctions, the US has not been buying anything from Russia, or there's no trade with Russia. When they hear the word sanctions, they think it is sanctions. Now, Russian oil, by the way, for our audience here, let me be very clear. Russian oil is not sanctioned. There's only a price cap so that the Russians don't make a lot of money selling oil. So even today, we have not violated any law. We are allowed to buy Russian oil. So is everyone else, except that the US, since this war between Russia and Ukraine, the US has imposed a price cap on Russian oil.
Okay, I think my disagreement, if any, with the statement is not on calling out the hypocrisy, but on saying, oh, but the Americans encouraged us to do this in the beginning. What do we care if the Americans encouraged us to do this or not? However, since that point has been brought up, I'm going to actually play out a statement from a rather contentious ambassador of America to India, Eric Garcetti, when he did make this point. And I just want to play this out. Let's take a look.
That India hasn't been more outspoken. But remember, Russia, as Soviet Union, was there when we weren't, so there's goodwill and history there. I've talked to so many Indians whose first foreign magazine they ever read, foreign food they ever ate was Russian. It's embedded in a generation, especially an older generation. And secondly, one of them said to me, so we've got these two big countries right on top of us, and you want us to be enemies with both of them, and you're halfway around the world? Explain that to me. So we also have to be somewhat sympathetic to understand that. And third point, they said, and by the way, because you guys wouldn't sell stuff, all of our military equipment right now is Russian. And we have existential crises on two borders. And if we're invaded tomorrow, you want us to be anti-Russian? So once you get there, we kind of got past the ability of saying, oh, just follow America. You have to do exactly as we do. And we take the smaller victories. Actually, they bought Russian oil because we wanted somebody to buy Russian oil at a price cap. That was not a violation or anything. It was actually the design of the policy, because as a commodity, we didn't want oil prices going up. And they fulfilled that. During G20, they were able to take Russia to the side and say, take or leave this statement, which was critical about Ukraine. It just took the word Russia out, but it was very clear. And we were able to deliver Europe. They were able to deliver Russia. That boxed in China. And it showed, again, this multiplicative relationship when we get.
So, Suhasini, there are two ways of looking at this. One, I think, as Prasad says, and I think there's merit in that most Americans, most Europeans actually do not know. I know, Prasad, give me just, you wanted to come in briefly before I get Suhasini? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. To the last point, what Rajat made about how our Indian diplomats behave, and you showed Eric Garcetti. Can any of our Indian diplomats on camera dance and do a bhagada like how he did?
No, but why should they? Do we want them to do that? Is the point I think Ajit Puri is making.
Well,
yeah. I mean, we don't need the trudification of Indian diplomacy to be more contemporary. I think Rajat is making a different point. I think he's not asking for natak. I think he's saying unshackle your diplomats, give them more freedom. It can't just be this formal rule book thing. But Rajat will speak for himself. I want to just come to Suhasini on your point, that these graphs on American and European hypocrisy are addressing also audiences in their countries who may not even be aware that there's still trade ongoing with Russia. I do share your skepticism about why we're getting embroiled in how Americans actually wanted us at one point to buy this oil. Our decision should be driven by our interests.
Well, I also think, Barkha, it is not for us to be educating the United States audience about what is happening in the world. If we wanted to educate them, we could have countered Mr. Trump's statement that India seems to be fine with the killing in Ukraine by saying and accusing India of funding Russia's war in Ukraine, which is an extremely, extremely offensive statement to make, and respond to say that it's very clear to the world which war the US is funding at present. In terms of Israel and Gaza, and the killing over there that the US has not only actively supported, but continues to act against countries that actually have called Israel out for what is happening there. So I don't want to get into the idea that Indian diplomacy's job is to educate some American public about whether it is correct to import Russian oil or not. It is India's sovereign right. India is not accepting anybody else's decision on whether it should or not. And if it has in the past, it must revise and rethink whether it should do that with a country that is at present certainly behaving in an extremely irrational manner. And I do think somewhere there, it is not for India to continuously say, let's just keep engaging. Mr. Trump is engaging via social media on a daily basis. I agree with Rajat. Maybe our diplomats should be responding to him. Maybe the Prime Minister should be responding to him. Certainly have the Ministry of External Affairs hold a daily press conference. In the media world, we are not going to object to diplomats speaking more, for India to issue more statements, or to be more transparent about what their thought process is over here. But I think it is very definitely a situation where it is not for India to be constantly making excuses for the way the US behaves. If Mr. Trump is speaking, it's not just Mr. Trump who's speaking, it's the President of the United States who's speaking. And we know now that he is backing what he is saying with government action. When he says, for example, that there's a counter narrative on Operation Sindoor, that he mediated the crisis, that he did everything, it's not just him who's saying it, it's his Secretary of State who says it, it's his Commerce Secretary who goes to court and signs a sworn affidavit saying it. So I think this kind of minimizing of Mr. Trump's impact simply because it is Trump is counterproductive. We've had 6 months of this. I think that's long enough for us in New Delhi to understand that the US is doing what it is doing in a considered and thought out way. In certain terms, and we should also have our own idea of how we want to respond to it. I'm not saying a break of engagement, for heaven's sake, but I'm certainly saying that we need to reconsider this idea that the whole rest of the world India will engage with in one way, but when it comes to the US, we have to somehow be on our best behavior and put up with some extremely offensive things being said.
Let me present a counter view, not my own, but again coming from certain diplomats, Ambassador Puri, but I'll give it to Rajat first, who actually make the point that India is softer on China than it is on the United States of America, that we feel that we can pick these arguments with a Trump because in the end, Trump will get voted out. He's not going to be there forever. But a China that actually provided, to quote the army, live inputs during Operation Sindoor, has provided all the weaponry that Pakistan has. We have opened a parallel track with China. We understand, as those who study geopolitics, why we've done this. It's the real world. We have to have multiple sort of options in our basket. But there are those, and there's a very strong section of the strategic community that actually is saying, the choice you make is America. And you make this happen and you make this work, and you're much softer on China than you are, for example, on America. How do you see this argument, Rajat?
No, I don't think it's about soft or hard, and there is no parameter to say if we are hard or soft. In fact, we severed almost all engagement with China for 5 years till they did not back off. The people who are aware of the matter today can go out and look at the border on Ladakh side. Clearly, we are back to status quo ante. There is absolutely, retreat which was made by the Chinese in order to have this relationship mended. So the first step was taken by China. So I don't believe we were soft at any point. And again, going back on the America side, Prime Minister always used to say, and a lot of people within the right wing and the RSS ecosystem also do not believe the West. It was for a different reason earlier. It is for a different reason now. It is because of this mentality of exporting certain values out of US and pushing it down onto every other nook and corner of the country was deeply problematic. And this is why Prime Minister was so pro the idea that we need to also have better relationships with China, and he put in his personal political capital to do that. It was another matter that China took advantage of it, and then he was pretty stern about what happened post that. But now I think what is happening with Trump and where we are finding it hard to sort of engage is there are certain prominent actors within MAGA who are trying to use this as an H-1B political weapon, weaponizing that, bringing in, racist slurs, the Lindsey Graham or the Marjorie Greene, these kind of characters who are feeding information into Trump's ears. My point is that it's not like the ambassador needs to do a presser every day. That's not what my intent was. My understanding is that there would be means and mechanisms to reach out to these influential figures into the MAGA audience and try to, douse the misunderstanding or whatever you want to say that they're consistently peddling on everyday basis. I mean, if Trump is not speaking, but Lindsey Graham is speaking every single day against India. And it is brutal what he's saying, and untrue, of course, most of what he's saying. And that is where I believe a lot of our access should have played. We should have used certain back channel discussions to actually give him our perspective. Not that it is, important or necessary as the only mechanism to deal with Trump, but necessarily one important cog in the wheel.
I actually agree with you, and I want to ask Ambassador Puri about this. I take your point that sorry, Swati, did you have an interjection? Yeah. Hang on, let me just get your mic up. So
Just
go ahead.
Because Rajat made the point that Chinese troops have withdrawn, I would disagree. And just 3 weeks ago, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar was in China. He said again to Mr. Wang Yi that it's necessary, that disengagement happened last October, but the rest of the process, which involves de-escalation, demobilization, must take place. It hasn't yet taken place, and we're certainly nowhere close to status quo ante-2020. So just wanted to make that point.
Okay. And I think it's a complex question about China. Ambassador Puri, you may want to address it, because there is this sense that, in a way, our relationship with China is mired in much more opacity than our relationship with the Americans. It tends to play out in full public gaze. Whatever's happening with Trump is playing out in full public gaze. What's happening with China, partly because of the culture of China itself, is much more opaque. That's point one. Point two, we may be recalibrating our need to keep that relationship open, even if we're not fully comfortable with it, despite the role of China in Operation Sindoor. My question is on the point that Rajat made, and you said, it's not our job to be wading into Twitter wars, let the politicians do it. If Trump is the president, let the politicians counter him. There are some who are countering him. But I think we should acknowledge that when it comes to messaging, when you have a Marjorie Greene saying, let's just cancel all H-1B visas and so on, that disinformation acquires a life of its own. And what is our counter to that? I mean, we can't ignore this. So far, we were saying Trump speaks every day, let's just ignore him. I think it's gone well past that. Would you agree, Ambassador?
Barkha, thank you very much. On the China question, I just want to say something quite simple and straightforward. You are absolutely right. The relationship has formality in it, and there are reasons. They are opaque. It's not that we are also not opaque on those things. That's fine. I personally believe that this is a relationship with China. There are lots of issues on that relationship, but for economics, it's a very important relationship with us. If you deal with people who are in the business world, and when you hear from them what they have to say, believe me, it's a relationship of a lot of importance for us where we are in the Indian economy today. So let me leave that out. Let's come down to this. Look, there should be no doubt in your mind that the United States is a broad-based polity. You need to interact with people across the board, with politicians at different levels. If it's MAGA today who are in power, you need to interact with them. Earlier, you had to interact with the neocons. You had to interact with should I say, the interns who made up the policies in those years. It was important to do all that. And you must continue to do it. I'm sure we are doing it. Some of these things don't happen very easily because remember, to use a particular factor and play it up. Let's talk about this business of immigration. Immigration is a very major thing which is taking place there. You remember Mr. Ramaswamy, who was one of the contenders wanting to stand for presidency, and what happened to him at that particular time? People again use the very same sort of things, that here was a person who was coming from the other side, how can he stand for our presidency, etc. This is the nature of this particular game which gets played by this MAGA constituents at that particular end. You must undertake this particular action, but let us remember that it takes time to do these particular things. They're not particularly easy to do. And let me again say this. If there is engagement at the government level, and I know that today is a very difficult time, and you think that in the public domain lots is happening, if you keep up the engagement, you will find that those who are the instigators, they see the writing on the wall and they come behind that in their own sort of manner. So patience is a very difficult word, and so is strategic autonomy a very difficult word, but they both need to be played.
Okay. Prasad, I want to bring you in on the consequence of these tariffs. We don't actually know what the final number is going to be that Trump tries to levy against India. We don't know what the penalty will be. We don't know, as Swadeshi pointed out, are we going to come up with reciprocal tariffs? But someone like you has been counting on the fact that, look, eventually the American consumer, him or herself, is going to be hurt by this. And therefore, Trump will back off or will recalibrate, or there'll be a taco moment with Trump and he'll he'll change his policy. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know you've been looking at things like the price of even edibles.
Yeah. I mean, that's the business I'm in. We manufacture our products in India and then we sell them, retail them in the US. So just for the users, I'd sent you some data about how it actually plays out, right?
So we took your data and we simplified it. You can talk over this. Your argument was that if a 5 kilo stack of basmati rice costs about $17 right now, post Trump's tariffs, it would be $18.50. I think you've calculated this at 25% tariff. I
At
don't know what
25.
tariff. Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
but
Yeah.
what's important is the tariff is paid. The 25% tariff is paid on the shipping bill of the price that is put on the shipping bill from India while entering the US. At the end point, the end consumer, the impact on the end consumer is very significantly small. It's just literally, if you see on a 5 kg bag, if there's a 25% tariff, instead of $17, if the entire tariff is passed on, it'll be $18.50. And the people who buy basmati rice, they don't care. They don't even know that there's a $1.50 increase. Nobody even watches these things. It will show up in the inflation numbers eventually if it is passed on. Now,
But if that's the case, there's no domestic pressure on him to curtail these tariffs. Or is it different? Is it different for different goods?
That's my whole point. Tariffs. Right now, the US badly needs money. They've got such a huge deficit. They're trying to reduce the deficit. He's trying to pressure the Federal Reserve Chairman to reduce interest rates. There are bonds that are maturing, approximately 3 or 4 trillion in the next 18 months that he has to pay back to all the bondholders around the world. He needs money. He doesn't have any money. So he's finding ways to tap into foreign countries to finance this. And that's what he's trying to do.
Let me read out a comment to you, and then we have to take last comment. Saurabh Vishisht in our audience says, the American citizen will take the pain on retail prices for a while, as long as they see a hard line on immigration. That's what Trump is delivering. ICE, that's their anti-immigration agency, ICE on the anti-illegal immigration agency, ICE on the streets.
That's correct. And being here on the ground, let me tell you, what's happening on the streets is not for legal immigration. It is illegal immigrants. They have a huge Latin American illegal immigrant population that is living and doing all kinds of things in the US, draining the US resources, which is being addressed via ICE. And trust me, whether basmati is $17 or $18.50, those illegal people don't care because they just steal it from the store.
But I think the point Rajat is making, and I'll start my last comments with you, Prasad, is only a matter of time before misinformation, fake news blurs these lines between illegal and legal, where the H-1B visa is talked about today by certain people in the MAGA community as if it was illegally obtained.
That's exactly why it is so important for us as individuals, the government, everybody to also communicate directly with the American public, because what is being fed to them by their politicians is not entirely true. And that's why those 2 points, I re-emphasize why it is so important that the press release had those 2 points in that. It is very important for us to be in tune with the way things are in the US. We are dealing with the US. Think about it, Barkha. We had a foreign policy style during the Obama years. It was the same prime minister. Modi had one style with Obama. He had another style with Biden. He had similar style with Trump. So it is a personality-driven relationship that India has to maintain to further its own goals. We are not here for charity. We are at the end of the day trying to achieve what India wants to achieve. And for that, you have to adjust and be flexible, even in our foreign policy and our behavioral strategies. That's my point.
Okay, so if you talk about behavioral strategy, Rajat, I think what Trump really wanted was for somebody high up in government to say, thank you, Mr. President, for your role. And, it could have been framed ABC way in Operation Sindoor. Do you believe retrospectively that olive branch could have been offered? And again, I do not mean mediation. I do not mean brokering of peace. Theoretically, somebody could have said, thank you, Mr. Trump, for making Pakistan see sense, for making Pakistan see the writing on the wall, etc. I don't know if it would have been enough for, this rather unhinged president. Rajat, last comments.
I agree. All communications around Operation Sindoor were pathetic, to say the least, which includes, the way we handled when Trump was bluffing on a daily basis. Our foreign ministry or whosoever within the government should have handled it much more deftly. I think Prime Minister was pretty, he was using the words in a very delicate manner in the parliamentary address. so that it doesn't sound abrasive or sound as if he's trying to contradict Trump, and also delivering the message. So he was circumspect on that. But it's not like Prime Minister Modi has to come out every time and do the cleanup. It's the exercise that he has enabled through positions for them to do jobs which they failed at. And I believe a lot of things happened. And then, Trump has multiple objectives going on. First, he wanted that, kudos from India and possibly a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize or whatever it's worth. Then he also wants to deflect from the Epstein issue and and charge up his base again. What's the base? How does the base get charged up? It's all this H1B conversation. This is what charges his base and tends to forget the Epstein issue. So he's doing all of this. He brings in the tariff. The conversations are back on tariffs now. The conversations are no longer on Epstein. So he's succeeding. So he's deflecting his own base away from that and taking them to where he's more comfortable in handling. And I think this is what Trump wants. And net, if H1B goes off, India's talent will come back. Trump, if he's happy with his newfound love for Pakistan, he's good luck with the grooming gangs from Pakistan coming into America. I'm fine with it as long as my talent from my country comes back to my country.
Yeah, there's just one point there, and I'll bring in Suhasini before giving Ambassador Puri the last word. If Trump is trying to manage headlines, trying to get the attention of the Epstein sort of issue where the files haven't been declassified because there's this huge debate over whether Trump's name is in it, not in it, in what form is it there, Epstein being someone accused of sex trafficking who went to jail, and I'm only giving this background for our audience, and then dies in mysterious circumstances. Trump is trying to change this headline. If he's trying to change this headline, nothing we actually say is going to actually change his response. And there, when Rajat says the communication could have been better, it was not as effective, probably whatever we said wasn't going to change his attempt to change the headline. I'm guessing. So, Hasni?
Well, the truth is, Barkha, that some of the blame can be put on communication, but we also have to remember there's been some kind of mismatched expectation between the two sides that has led to this situation. Maybe there is just a misunderstanding at the highest level, and I think if there is a takeaway, it is not for diplomatic formalism or whatever to be lessened, but for our diplomats to be allowed to do their job. This idea for the last decade and a half that symmetry is going to fix problems has completely been debunked. Prime Minister Modi met with Chinese President Xi Jinping 18 times in 5 years. He still didn't see the Galwan clashes coming, and we certainly don't have an explanation from the government on why China did what it did in April 2020. So there was some kind of gap in understanding there. Mr. Trump and Mr. Modi met in February. India had the first movers advantage, declared a FTA agreement, negotiations long before Mr. Trump even came up with his tariffs. And yet there seems to be a failure to have followed through on that, or whatever the understanding between them was. So my own sense would be maybe a little less of this symmetry dealing at the top level until the diplomats, the officials have actually had an opportunity to assess each other, assess what the other government is doing. After all, it's very easy to make fun of Mr. Trump and say, he sounds crazy every day, he has a new idea. But is there a plan? Is there something that is important to America that India needs to listen into? Should America have listened to India much more closely when India said, look, agricultural market access is a red line. It's not going to be on the table. So my point is, let that happen a little more, and maybe just put much less stock in what the leaders do when Mr. Modi goes and says, Ab ki baar Trump sarkar, and it becomes, it seems like there's a great personal relationship going on. When countries deal with each other, they deal at very different levels.
Yeah, I think that last point is a good point, and we've discovered this in so many other relationships. I just think we didn't think we would discover it in this way with America. Ambassador Puri, so what next? Again, I should end by saying that the Times of India reports that Ajit Doval is on his way or has arrived in Moscow. I do not have independent corroboration of this. I'm saying this is not my own piece of news, but I'm picking it up from the TOI. Jaishankar could be going next. There is a bit of carrot and stick power play happening here, I'm sure. Where do you see this going from here?
Barkha, first, I just want to say something on this Russia thing. I think Swadeshi had made the point, and I recall this also. There is an India-Russia joint commission which is headed on the Indian side by the foreign minister and the deputy prime minister dealing with economics on the Russian side. It's due to meet. And this is in the run-up to President Putin coming here for the summit. So, let's not give too much of signaling and all of this. It's fine, these things happen. Some of these things happen in this particular sort of a manner as they do. Insofar as the relationships at the top is concerned, Barkha, there's a saying that chemistry matters. So maybe our guys, along with President Trump, are of the belief that only chemistry matters. Well, you've just said so. Chemistry is important. Diplomacy has its own place. I know it's a tough time for those who've been trying to, push the Indo-American relationship in various ways, sitting here in New Delhi in particular. But come on, challenges are par for the course. I personally believe that the size of the relationship at the level of the people, at the level of the corporates, at the level of, thinking people, at several levels is there. There are issues going back to domestic policy in the United States, in elsewhere, etc., which become problematic. You mentioned agriculture for us, immigration kind of things as far as they are concerned. These are issues to which we can't give simple answers to them. We need to engage. I believe the answer really lies. Challenge, yes. Huge with a capital C, but engage, I also believe, with a capital E. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to all of you. It is going to be interesting to see what the next few days unfold. I think there are going to be some made-for-media moments, but what's really important is the parts we do not know or we do not get to know. What's happening behind the scenes? Is there quiet negotiations on that aren't playing out in full public gaze? That's really where the results often are, quite away from the cameras and the chemistry or the perceived chemistry. We leave it there. Prasad, Duburi, Ambassador Puri, Rajat, and Suhasini. Thank you. A pleasure as always. And to our audience, thank you and see you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.